Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's installment of Lighting the Candle, stepping off into a world that works, and all the other cool things that you can think of that gets your head into a good space and filled with energy and love. So I'm Bill Carell, and I'm the convener of this conversation, and we have some other folks with us again today, and we'll start off by just a quick introduction and what's the main thing for you this afternoon. We'll start with you, Shelly.
So Shelly Kohler, small business advisor, coach, entrepreneur. As I left off, I think a couple weeks ago, was with Breathe, and I think it remains the same. Just remember to breathe. That's seems to be the continual mantra.
Good. Welcome. Ken?
Howdy. Ken Caputo. And let's see, just continuing to advocate for meaningful human connection, empowered learning, and finding some fun in the present moment amidst all of this chaos and strain. So, I think what I'm pondering right now is a quote that I'll share in a little bit from Meditations, Marcus Aurelius, that's I think might be relevant to what's going on in the world right now.
Excellent. Good. Thanks for coming on. Lisa?
Good afternoon, Lisa Sheehan. I've been in media my whole life, and now I'm an entrepreneur. Trying to help people raise people's consciousness one page at a time, as we like to say at Epic. And my words for today are, and this past week has been, I guess, sum it up as expansion and inclusion.
Two great words.
Yeah.
And for either of those to exist, there has to be invention.
Creation was my other word. Yeah.
They're not already out there. You have to bring it. That's
Creation was my other word at a group the other day, too. So.
I like it. Good. So I think the main thing for me today is just reconnecting with past friends. I've spoken to several different people over the last week or so on many different subjects. I had a nice conversation with a man that Ken and I both know, who was a real contributor to our chamber in Wyndham, and who is now in Sarasota, Florida, which is near and dear to my heart. Having been a resident of Florida for 13 years, we spent quite a bit of time over in the Bradenton, Sarasota, all up and down the Keys there. So I think the main thing also for me is organization. The centering that becomes available when balance and things are kind of however crazy they may be, it's almost normal for it to be that crazy all the time now. So the organization of my thoughts, of my environment, family, friends, business, the whole nine yards. And so it's not something to, in my view of it, is not something to force. It's not something to cause. It's something, to kind of rest and see where the neutral position ends up being. And with what you were talking about, actually everybody was talking about, between breathing and listening, expanding and including and creating, there's enough going on there that's worth getting out of bed for in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So who has something to share now?
I wrote down, I saw, a sign along the road that keep popping up everywhere, like, the Lions Club, be kind is everywhere all of a sudden. But I found another one, but I left the paper downstairs because I want your all opinion on it. Okay. So I'll be right back.
Okay.
So just something I noticed when we were all kind of sharing here is it's like one really leads into the next. And without one, you really can't have the full experience of the other. For me, this week was just starting with breathing, being able to do that so that I could listen, so that I could reconnect, and so that, with Lisa's inclusion, creativity, like all of those could happen. It's just really kind of a cool thing that I just kind of noticed. Brought it all together for me.
I will also note the correlation between the TV being turned off and my head actually not needing to explode. It has
Good
been
correlation.
It's a calming experience, Really, I used to have a T-shirt that said "Ignorance is bliss," and I refuse to be made unhappy. So don't bring me no bad news, right? Anyhow, that's it. I think most of the conversations this week have not been about current events. It seems like most people that I've spoken with are talked out about that.
Mm-hmm.
They're not quite sure, what is there to talk about, So maybe, I think, Lisa, you were saying last week that it seemed like things were sort of, settling a little bit. I think people's willingness to be at a high alert in terms of upset because of what they're hearing and seeing in the news is kind of becoming, it's becoming thin. Most people are like on to bigger and better things. They know that the news is going to keep coming. There'll still be, every time you turn the TV set on, that there'll be more things for you to see that are supposed to make you upset. And turns out, it's not really a whole lot of people that are involved in it. Just enough that there's always images on every media, that you turn on. Not spending a lot of time on Facebook either,
Okay.
Me neither.
Yeah, I know.
So while you say all that settling, and I agree with that settling, and I put it somewhere in an email that people are coming to terms with all the issues and feeling where they stand amongst it all, and it is settling down. But then I see this sign as I'm driving. It's the second time I've seen it. It's an American flag on one of those, those simple little, they're probably not expensive signs that they've been plopping everywhere. But it's American flag, says only cowards remain silent. And then in smaller letters, it says refute anti-American lies while it's still legal to do so. And I wasn't even sure where to go with that one, so I wanted your opinion on.
Refute American lies while it's still legal to do so?
And of course, there was nobody claiming it. There was no organization name, nothing on it.
Side of the road.
And it's the second one I've seen.
Yeah, it's a fear-based response.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of concern. I mean, even like with the mask thing, that there's the government or whoever, Bill Gates, the corporation, I don't know, someone's taking away your rights, and and you're not going to be able to. You're going to be censored. You're going to be kept from being able to voice your opinion anymore. And and you see that like that cancel culture is another kind of, I was looking into that a little bit. I was curious about it, and it's just basically people ganging up on someone who says things that they don't like, and at times that can be appropriate. If you're speaking hate, being called out on that is not a bad thing, but then it starts spilling into, canceling people that you don't agree with, who just has a different view from you. So, and I think for a lot of people, they see any removal of a right, that what they view as a right, as opposed to just a responsibility, that removal leads to a slippery slope. And before you know it, we're a communist country or a socialist country or whatever else it is. So, so I think like with everything, there's some value in thinking that through. and not just blindly, thinking that it couldn't happen, but at the same time, doing the rigorous work of fact checking and being present, in the system, whether it's voting or whatever it is. So, but yeah, I've seen some things like that too. And that's, the heart-based part of it is this fear of, our country turning into something that isn't what we want it to be.
Mm-hmm. Very much agree.
Shelly, you have any thoughts on it?
I agree wholeheartedly with what Ken is saying. There's that fine line of being really, for lack of a better word, really sucked down that rabbit hole into believing that we're being told lies. But then there's the responsibility of making, sure and doing your due diligence and fact checking. And an example, I have a friend who is very much into essential oils and has not vaccinated her children. Her children are, 10, 12, 13, and 14. And it has become more of and she's just livid that her kids are going to have to wear a mask when they go to camp. So it became a total boycott. And it's that fine line of her saying, these are my rights, I don't have to wear one. But then on the other side, it's like, but you have a responsibility to protect not just your son and your daughter, but those around you. So it's that slippery slope. And if in fact people are not aware enough, or again, it charges something in them, they're just going to go straight to the fear-based without doing what they should. And that is awareness, right? So it's the awareness of, why are they saying that? I need to look into that. Or, they're saying that. I need, yeah, right, they're taking the advantage of me. I need to make sure they don't do that. So it's really what side and how much are people aware of where they stand, where they want to stand, and what they believe in. So it's a slippery slope. People are just going to have to wake up in their own shoes, not, ride on the coattails of someone else anymore. You really just have to have your own awareness. And no, I don't have to agree with them, but that doesn't mean I hate them. That's what has created a lot of innovation and wonderful things in this world, is where people don't agree. So that's kind of my thoughts, and kind of filling in some of the areas in which Ken had.
Lisa, would you do me a favor and read it one more time, please?
Bigger letters was only cowards remain silent. And then smaller letters, much smaller letters, was refute anti-American lies while it's still legal to do so.
So that almost, to me, sounds like it's like so many things that are in the media. It's a Rorschach test. There's something in that for everybody. It's going to land, and it's going to agree with whatever dogmatic principles and ideology that you woke up with this morning. Some people are going to hear that from the standpoint of the America that they woke up into is oppressive. It's unfair. It starts off as completely prejudiced and biased and anti-whatever. The America that they woke up into is oppressive again. It's so I don't know if you've ever read anything by Conrad Richter. he wrote a trilogy called the Trees, the Field, and the Town, the 3 books that were in the trilogy. And it went through the Little House on the Prairie sort of a thing where they were surviving and, at that low level where they literally could die because of the winter. They had to take care of, the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy. But the prediction of it was, as we became more centralized and more systematized in terms of living with other people in a small area, going from the trees, the fields, from a survival to an agrarian society to one that's more city-centric, and people have different parts of the system that they do, but they don't have to do everything every day in order to survive. The whole idea of the people that can be esoteric and lofty in their thinking and in their demagoguery is a result of affluence. People who are starving to death are not going around complaining to people and telling folks what's wrong with the world. They're looking for a meal. So it's the affluent ones who don't have to produce anything. And they were in the book kind of goes through and it tells a neat story about what has happened society after society after society through history, when there became a gap between the haves and the have-nots. And that as you got more people that were associated either with one half or the other, just from a financial and economic standpoint, that was a big divider. Well, now what we have is we have people that sit around, they get paid money to figure out how they're going to divide us, into 100 different things where whatever we wake up and read is going to, this is a technical term, piss us off, okay, one way or another. Again, the Rorschach test. Is it, do you see the lady's face, or do you see the side of a vase, So what I'm hearing in what that says is that that's worth spending some time thinking about. And I agree with Ken completely. What does it mean for me to hear? I mean, I went through having my posts being taken down from Facebook, for no good reason whatsoever. And it may have just been something that automatically happened because of an algorithm, and there was no thinking that went on in it. But I was a little bit disturbed by that, to have the same post taken down twice. Well, the last one that I put up has not been taken down. So I have no idea what the heck happened there. So in the meantime.
What was the post?
Huh?
What was the post?
The post was probably a dozen different black men talking about how that rich white people, elites, are manipulating the black masses in the inner city. That most people that live outside of the the hood in Chicago or Los Angeles or New York, who have gotten away and are now professionals and then are also college educated, they've got their nose to the grindstone, building a life for themselves and their family. They're not going to the polls. These are now folks that have conservative views, that they might only be centrist, these days. But you get somebody like Morgan Freeman basically saying, don't call me a black man and I won't call you a white man. As far as I'm concerned, we're men and we're Americans, and we have that in common, and that's what we should be exploring. And I don't know, I think I talked about this before with his interview with Mike Wallace, when they were talking, about the African American month, and Morgan says, "Do you have a white American month?" And Mike said, "No, I don't." He said, "But I'm also Jewish." And he said, "Well, do you have a Jewish American month?" And Mike said, "No, I don't." I said, "You get all year, but I have to be satisfied with a month." So anyway, what I'm kind of alluding to is that when you start looking at media, telling whatever story will sell advertising, start looking at Twitter and Facebook and other, where a lot of us spend our time these days, censoring different types of messages and taking them down, how much of a reach is it to when people actually come to our neighborhood with black masks on, with whoever they represent, and start beating on our doors? So when we are upset about something is when we are most vulnerable to impression. It's when an idea can take shape more easily and kind of grow from, in my opinion.
Well, if you think in terms of just sales, that's one of the first things you learned was the way our brains are wired. We can't really make a decision based on information, but we can make a decision based on emotion.
Yes.
Lacking all information. And usually the information that we seek out validates the emotional decision that we've made. So if you feel like the country is going down the toilet, you're going to see the information that validates that. And then if you see this as being, kind of a bardo, Tibetan word for in between, and there's going to be better things born out of it, then you'll see that information. There's even that thing about, I don't remember which study it was, but about the fact that like the positive and negative input coming in around you, you're limited on how much of one you can see relative to how much of the other you're looking for. So if you're looking for negatives, you literally can't see the positives. They're invisible to you. So someone yelling at you saying it's so clear to me, it makes perfect sense, here's all the studies, here's all the data, it's invisible to them. It's just not. So you have to, I did it. I was a very negative, hostile person when I was young. So I had to retrain my brain, and learn to see the positives and speak only positive. And it took like 5 years to, I was like an angry kid. And I grew up to be an angry teenager, and I was a really pissed off 20-year-old. And then, looked in the mirror and I'm like, I don't like this person, So, and it's just really interesting. So it's hard, I guess is the point. It's like, so whoever, had the idea for that sign and whoever's sharing it, they've adopted a view that, it's going to be challenging. Even if they wanted to, it's going to be challenging to open up to other perspectives, So, and that's why we end up so polarized, it's kind of designed that way.
Yeah. Well, Sales 101 is, what motivates people? Fear, greed, and envy. Those are the three things. And so I actually had somebody, I'd forgotten all about this, but the first thing that a good salesman does is to take somebody who's completely satisfied with their life and start to make them a little bit dissatisfied.
Yep.
And then present a partial solution, not a full solution, but a partial solution to that dissatisfaction. Yep. And so all of this has everything to do with manipulation. It has nothing to do with leadership. It has nothing to do with esprit de corps and, common values. And, when you think about the fundamental difference between all of us and just a simple little thing like the Pledge of Allegiance in the classroom or the morning prayer, we took those things for granted. Those weren't things that we voted on. We just showed up and that's what you did first thing in the morning, right? I only remember one kid who was a Jehovah's Witness. His name was Levi Pyle, and he sat during both of those things because as a Jehovah's Witness, they were not, not supposed to do that. And I asked him about it and I said, well, why is that? And he said, I have no idea. Yeah. He's an 8-year-old in the 3rd grade, right? So Levi's parents told Levi what he could and couldn't do when he got to school, but none of the kids harassed him. Nobody ever said anything other than what's up with that? Quite different today. When I look at my 2 grandchildren, they're different than me. I'm Caucasian. The fact that they have Navajo in them is very evident. They're dark-skinned. They're extremely well-tanned. They're both handsome and beautiful young men, but they do exhibit, bone structure that would be, a little. Well, actually, Jack is devastatingly handsome as I am. So, he's 9 years old. But my point is this: it's not all right with me that they be taught that they're somehow genetically different and either flawed or better. Do you know what I'm saying? I think whenever somebody looks at identity as an intrinsic part of who they are, like DNA and that sort of thing, that doesn't make any sense in my world. The way that I look at people is we all have the same opportunity. We don't all have the same outcomes. And I know people that have, like Ken said, Ken, you were destined probably to spend most of your adult hood in jail, the way you talked about it, if something hadn't happened and you hadn't made another choice. So the point there is that as long as there are enough people who are interested in changing the lot for the people who have these barriers, like the economic barrier where people cannot afford, they're being paid just enough money to stay where they are right now, to live in fear and danger, and they don't believe they can go someplace else and exist and be safe. Can you imagine that kind of thinking? Why would somebody put up with the fact that there's 40 gunshots a week within the sound of their hearing, when they could get into their car or they could get on a bus and they could just go someplace else where it might be safe? I don't understand.
Elephant in the stake, I think that's a big part of it. It's like that whole story about they tie the elephants to the stake when they were little and they couldn't pull the stake out, and they would just get huge. They more than had the ability to do it, but never thought to. And all they had to do was try it once, and then that would shift.
Yes.
But it's just we're all. It's very hard not to define yourself by your story, and we have a tendency as people to tell our story more and more and more, and I think that story can become the narrative that rules us instead of being something that just guides us, like a learning experience. So it's tough.
Yeah, I don't know where the study was, but it's like we all, like, the percentage is so high about we all stay in the same economic level that we were raised in. I mean, some people break out, but for the most part, and I can look at my friends and everything like that, and I will say to, like, my father, and he'll kind of disagree and then think about it, but it's not much different than you could go back probably generations that everybody kind of maintains.
Yeah, one of the big changes, Lisa, is the lack of opportunity for manufacturing jobs to take people with relatively low skill, but a great work ethic, and allow them to progress through life, going from minimum wage to making decent incomes. A lot of stories over the last 50 to 75 years of people who got out of high school, didn't go to college, and started by sweeping floors or material handling in manufacturing companies and worked themselves. I worked for a man who did exactly that, and he ended up being CEO of a corporation that had over 1,100 people in it. Why? He just dedicated his life to knowing everything that there was to know about every job in the building and about every product and everything that was associated with what their customers were buying. I don't know where you go to have that experience now. It seems like most people are going to be working at a minimum of 6 to 10 different companies during their adult lifetime, as opposed to the person that started, at Ford and retired from Ford with a gold watch.
Different world.
It is.
It's a different world, absolutely. There's timelines that go along with that. In regards to innovation. Our technology and innovation has outpaced some of the other conditions,
yes,
right, that we as humans have had or have not had the ability to hop on or even take advantage of those opportunities. So, you know, it's an outpace, not necessarily an imbalance, but the evolution of our technology and innovation to take some of these basic jobs away now leaves a void, and that has never been filled. Right? So that void continues to get bigger as our mindsets and our conditions are not increased, or society, people are not taking advantage of those opportunities, whether they don't know about them,
yes,
or they just don't know how to move out of one into another. That's kind of my business focus and mindset, and what I see in the big picture. And all of this other stuff is really in the middle of that, dealing with the awareness or the fear driven, the greed and the manipulation. And it's a lot. It's a lot for someone who has the capacity to decipher this. You know, anybody driving along and seeing that sign, Lisa, is not going to stop and go, what does that mean? They're either going to hop on board and see it as an opportunity or something to be part of, or create in their world. Like Bill was saying, you know, I woke up in this world. That sign is going to pinpoint to exactly their world, no matter what that world is. And so they're on that path, and the 100,000 other cars that pass that, they're doing the same thing. If in fact they don't have that, right? Like, let me check in a little bit about that. So we are now, you know, as you said, we're settling, but now people are settling into their own worlds of fear and manipulation and greed, and where they go with it. Again, can they even see opportunity, or do they even know that they can get in their car and drive away?
I completely say that our bandwidth of affluence in this country is that no one has to starve. No one has to, okay? And quite frankly, with the number of people that are living on the streets in our major cities at this point, I believe that even more today than I did 40 or 50 years ago. There are enough people out there that are making sure that the daily needs are being met wherever possible, or the government is kicking some money in, or somebody else is. But the point that this all comes back to is when you're numbed by being in a state of, you know, of everything is how it is, and you don't know what you don't know, where's there to go, you know, when you don't know it's out there, right? Maybe there's the human behavior norm of, what if I do something to make things worse? You know, what if it doesn't make things better? But what I really enjoy is I love seeing immigrants. I love seeing people come to the United States. And I have some Vietnamese friends, some Korean friends. Like my Korean friends, they have a liquor store. And it's two sisters, and they actually live together, and they're with each other like 20 hours a day. And I talk to them about, you know, their education and everything, and they're educated in the United States, and they have a liquor store. They have no debt, right? And I have another friend who was from Vietnam, and he came and he bought a downtown bodega, you know, in Hartford. And I met him after his kids were in college, and his daughter was graduating from law school. And he said, I own this building, I own that building, I own that building, and I own that building. He had like a city block that over the 25 years that his kids were growing, one thing at a time. He bought, you know, the business and paid for it. He said, when I first got here, I didn't buy a car. I slept in the back of my store, I didn't buy a car, because if I bought a car, that would take me away from my primary concern, which was making a living here. And I would have to spend money on keeping it up. I would have to find a place to park it and pay to park it. I didn't have a car. So on he went, but he was buying a Mercedes-Benz from me, a used one that he was giving to his daughter that was graduating from law school. So, you know, if you take the time, you can find really great stories out there.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, unfortunately, are spending more time looking at the boob tube and less time going out and meeting with human beings and finding out what their story is. We walk past extraordinary people every day of our lives and we don't know it.
Right.
I say, okay?
Sometimes they don't even know it.
Exactly.
What they're doing, right?
And to Ken's point, you know, sometimes people are stuck in their story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like, this is my story and this is how I'm living, and, you know, and then when they meet somebody new, this is my story, because
Right.
they want to know who you are and what your story is. And it's a journey. It's part of, I don't even say story anymore. It's a part of your journey of life. This is what happened and this is how things happen, but there's always that open door for the next step into the journey. And it's not going to be like yesterday unless it's Groundhog Day and you make it that way. There's always that opportunity to take that step in a different direction, right? As long as we have the cognitive notion that we can, and that we have an open door. We don't see a closed door all the time.
Well, you know what? That idea usually comes from someone else. In 100% of the cases, people who have risen beyond their station in life, it's been because there was somebody else there who told them, maybe you can.
Right. And it's called call a friend.
Yeah. And the part of what the men were talking about in that post was the biggest difference between families of color in the 1970s. Over 50% or 80% of them had two-parent families in that time frame. Now 80% have one-parent families. So they're not talking about people out in the suburbs. They're talking about where the concentration of ethnic groups are inside the cities. And that means there's no one demonstrating leadership models. That means there's no one, you know, other than their peers in gangs and, you know, what they do to survive on a daily and weekly basis. That's how it is. I mean, that's just plain how it is. What is there to escape from in that situation? These are the people that keep you alive.
Mm-hmm.
So what's very interesting about it is that organizations like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the YMCA, churches, all of those sorts of things that have these opportunities for mentoring programs. I don't know what it's going to take to get the candle lit to the point where the people who are shooting each other in these major cities on a weekly basis now will listen. You know? Do you remember Hill Street Blues?
Mm-hmm.
And you remember, so the major thing was Frank Furillo, Captain Furillo, interfacing with the gang, and they were all Spanish, gangsters, and I love the accent, you know, Furillo, you know. So the whole idea was to start building these communication lines and get police to go out and work in the communities. In Willimantic, we actually had in the 1990s, which I helped, to get together, the community policing, where they rode around on bicycles, the bike cops. Joe Yarchuk was a sergeant, and other people over in Taylor Court and, you know, Ives Street and that part of Willimantic. I don't know how that works these days. I only know that if I were to believe that everywhere it looks like what we're seeing on television, is there's a complete breakdown. I'm not certain that that's actually going on in a lot of different places. Where do I go to fact check that? Where do I go to get information on how it is in Hartford or how it is in New Haven or how it is in Willimantic? You know what I'm saying?
Well, first we have to know the actual structure in which it and how it's supposed to work. So I think I've mentioned this before, or someone had said it. The systems that have been built are not broken. They are designed, and they're doing exactly what they were designed to do. So if we look at that, we call it a breakdown because there are people challenging that, right? It's doing what it's supposed to do, but the challenge was never kind of brought to the surface, and now it is. So we're calling it that the government is broken. And it's always going to be broken in our eyes because there are certain things that don't work for everybody. So, when we say, how do we fact check that? We're in a different era. The systems were built 50 years ago. We don't even know how they should be working.
Well, I can tell you one thing that is completely different is that police departments were held to a standard called whatever the law is. And now they report to an elected official. The elected official can tell them this week to do something different than last week. That's completely at odds with what the ordinances and the laws say in the city and the state. For instance, don't arrest anybody unless there's more than $925 involved. They can steal. That's okay. It's just there are too many people that are doing that sort of thing. We can't get them all. So, that's just one of the really weird things that's being done. But what we are seeing is, I know what I'm going to do. I've got a bunch of police officer friends. I'm going to give them a call and just ask them how it is. How is it for them? I may have some research for you next week.
Yeah, I have a friend that has a son that just signed up to be a New Britain police officer.
Yeah.
So he's just starting. So I could ask him how it's going.
Sure.
He just passed all his tests, so he's on board. But we'll see how.
Well, Shelly and I also have a friend, two friends who have a son that's a police officer as well. So there's plenty of room for research here, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is again, where do you go? This is one of those, I don't know what I don't know in terms of how I can go triangulate to some place where, there's actually this pure as the driven snow factual data that's available. Is there any? Anybody aware of any?
I wonder how relevant it's. Where are you looking, downstream or upstream? And when you're looking upstream, to me, that's first coming to agreement as to what you would like it to look like, because there's a lot of disagreement on that.
Yeah.
So, so again, the facts are just going to, whatever the facts are, look at the whole COVID thing. The facts are whatever people choose to interpret them as. Mm-hmm. And if they don't like the way it's being represented, they just say they're being lied to, or it's incomplete or whatever. So you're never going to be able to have any sense of, forward movement and action if you don't stop and think, okay, well, we need enough agreement on where we want to go. Now the data becomes something that helps us navigate towards that, and maybe years from now, you'll be able to look back and get an accurate historical perspective on it, but you don't really have that. It's kind of funny. The quote I wanted to share is it's from Meditations, which I read, and I love Stoicism as one of the philosophies that just kind of to study and practice and feed my brain with. And what a lot of people don't know is the value of Stoicism was for people who take action It wasn't something that you just pondered and sat there and thought about. The whole idea was you do things. These are, it was designed with that in mind. So there are really just 3 precepts to it, which is perception, action, will. Look clearly at something, take appropriate action on it, and then have the will to see it through. So a lot of times you come up with an upstream solution. It's complex. There's sacrifice, there's compromise. So when it ends up happening, we get frustrated. And then we go back to just making people feel better about a temporary fix. You see it in business. I don't have money. I got to do a fire sale. I got to do some crazy marketing thing. Oh, I can relax. Crap, I'm out of money again. And you go through that cycle over and over, right? Instead of just, taking the short-term hit, thinking about the long-term position you want to be in. So his quote was this. He says, all you need are these: certainty of judgment in the present moment, action for the common good in the present moment, and an attitude of gratitude in the present moment for anything that comes your way. And it was, it was my little quote that I, read yesterday. I was just kind of reflecting on it. And it was interesting because I was thinking about how the challenge right now is the present moment feels so downstream that it's not enough. Like how do you have certainty of judgment in this moment? And, what struck me was, you need the waypoints on the map. You're in the middle of the forest, you need to know where you were and where you're going so you can kind of, create a plot line for how you proceed in this moment, because just starting to walk can get you more lost, So, and then I think when you're feeling that you're personally at, like your personal world is threatened, the center of gravity of your identity relationship is more towards I than all. So it's really hard to think about common good, right? Because you're too busy thinking about what you need to do to get through the day, to pay your bills, to not lose your house. Having been there, it sucks. It's really hard to think about other people when you're losing everything that you worked for, and you're helpless to change it. That's how it feels. And you may not be, but when someone says, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you want to punch them in the throat, because that's, so Bill, you saw me go through a lot of it, and I never stopped.
No, you didn't.
Most of it didn't help, and it was just this feeling of helplessness that, so you're constantly having to rework your perception, and it takes a lot of resolve and will to get through that. And sometimes we just get tired and we give up. But so that quote was kind of interesting for its timeless value, while at the same time, it not being enough in and of itself when you're in very difficult times,
However, when you do have a compass and you pull the compass out, it's going to say something to you.
Yep.
The question that's on the table these days, are we giving our citizens a compass? Or are we giving them a lot of conflicting advice in terms of the direction they should go when they have no idea what they really want to do? I think in terms of, Stephen Covey's quote, which basically he's talking about, cultural norms, mores, where everyone gets to affect, the possibility for everyone else, where we are all as opposed to just me and I. Okay. So the quote is that in cultures of sufficient strength, laws are not necessary. But if they're not of sufficient strength, laws are not enforceable.
Mm-hmm.
So in the circumstances now that we see ourselves in, where it seems really, really permissive to allow a group of thousands of citizens, to be the cover for some evildoers that are doing millions of dollars worth of damage every single weekend, every single night these days, as a matter of fact. What are we up to, like 53, 54 days in Portland, Oregon, that they've had damage every single night with somebody going to the hospital? how can that possibly be all right in our country? How can that be all right in any country? You know what it resembles? Has anybody spent any time watching the news in Venezuela last year? This is what they were doing, you know? So my question is, who is sitting back being silent and accepting that our American story, you know, is being rewritten before our very eyes, where we don't have to be a country of laws any longer. And it started by people coming in droves over, you know, the north and south borders, and however they got here, going to sanctuary cities, going, don't worry about the laws, just come see us, okay? Please come see us. And so I don't know what we do about that. Anybody got any ideas?
Yup.
Yeah.
Empowered learning. This is like, you know, so I've taught martial arts for almost 3 decades now.
Yes.
And I've never considered it teaching people martial arts. I was teaching them how to learn. And the martial arts was just the vehicle for that.
Yes.
And that's why, you know, I start off with empowered learning.
Yes.
And meaningful human connection. If you have the belief that you are capable of taking control of your own learning, like, people don't need a compass. They need to recognize a compass could have value to them, and then be taught how to make their own damn compass, you know, and then to be confident and competent enough that if that compass no longer serves them, they can discard it and make a new one, you know, and that they're willing to look at information. Michael Singer talks about, you know, he says, in a meeting, understand that data is going to come in that's not yours. It's from an outside source. And if you just push against it or let your attention go to your own inside data to try to reference it, you're missing the point. It's that mental alchemy thing. Let the new data come in, mix with your experience, and then something new will come out of that, and you're changed, you know? And, you know, but that's scary. You know, I mean, so much of what we're dealing with now, you know, it's fear of change. So, you know, I think that if our focus was on empowering people to take control of their own learning, to know how to look at what matters to them, their core values, their own identity, then they'd have a reference base to make clearer decisions, and they'd be less influenced by the media and all these outside sources that,
Sure.
you know, yeah.
Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. And one of the things that comes to mind while you're speaking, Ken, is almost any sport involvement, a team sport, probably not tennis, maybe tennis, okay? Because it does tend to be a team sport with different, you know, like golf is a team sport in terms of having a first man, second man, third man, or person, the top golfer, the second golfer. There's usually 4 to 6 golfers on a team that play against other schools. But one of the quotes that John Wooden always used to say when he was recruiting athletes to come play for UCLA, you know, for the basketball Bruins dynasty back in the 1960s, was he would say this to the parents: I'm not interested in having a great athlete. The world's full of great athletes. I'm interested in having great human beings.
Yep.
And if they're interested in becoming great human beings, I want them in my program.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because
Yep.
you give me your young man, I'm going to give you back a leader. I'm going to give you back somebody who's pretty darn sure of what they're supposed to be doing. And I don't, you know, so next week, maybe we can get into where are those wisdom centers of empowerment? How can they be rekindled? How does this candle, you know, move from place to place to place, so that what I still believe is the majority of Americans of all creeds, colors, walks of life, nationalities, there's a common thread through all of those human beings that they get out of bed in the morning and they're not out to cause mischief for the rest of the population. They're out trying to make their life work. They're trying to make their families be safe and secure. And they ultimately want to live in a country that they can be proud of. And that's That's just how it seems to me at this point in time. And by the way, that's what I want my grandsons to believe.
Mm-hmm.
What you can't see what color you are from this side of the eyeballs, okay?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You can't see what your face looks like. I think that's kind of a fresh place to be, my opinion. Okay, so I'm done. Ken, any parting words?
Oh, just remembering that, we all only know what we know. Like in Buddhism, they talk about ignorance not as a bad thing. It's just the nature of the human condition. So, so much of this is just, a willingness to become a knowledge seeker and an intelligent decision maker. And that's the challenge right now. Those things have to be more important than, Netflix. So they're just not right now, not on a grand scale. So, it's going to be interesting where we go from here. That's for sure.
Shelly, how about you?
As to Lisa's point, the settling in, I definitely feel that happening within my clients, and that can become, the awareness can get lost inside of that. And I think it's the challenge to Ken's saying is not to, and to really just stay present and aware while other things might kind of just settle in around you, but just be aware and present to what's going on, and as well the willingness for the expansion of what is to come.
Interesting. Thank you.
Well said.
Lisa, how about you?
Well, to speak to what everyone has said too, is that, live the question. And I think if more people know that there's a question that can be asked, instead of just staying stuck. And I think if we can let people know that there is a candle burning, and to seek it out, because I think that's half the issue, that they don't know that there's a light to grab onto.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.